As far as I know, it's your second time here in Kiev, and actually, how you found it? Do you like it?
Correct, yeah. This is my second time here. I was here exactly the same dates, I believe, last year. And just always have a great time. The tech community here is amazing, so everyone's very eager, keen to learn, always get asked the most technical questions when I'm in Kiev. The front-end community is amazing. So I remember I spoke at JS Fest last year, and I believe it was the first time the event had ever run, and there was already over 600 attendees. So there's a huge community here. And like I said before, just really thirsty and eager for knowledge. So I've just been running a workshop for the whole entire day where some of the most technical questions I've ever been asked happened here in Kiev. So I find the community is really strong, but also very, very eager, very keen to learn, and quite technically advanced, which is great.
Okay, so let's talk about yourself a little bit. So how it happens that you select this performance? How you get into it?
Oh, how did I get into performance? Yeah. I've been a developer for 12 years now, a long time. So performance has always existed. It's always been a thing I've done a bit of, but I only officially started focusing on performance maybe 2 years ago. Performance is always a thing that affects CSS, which is what I'm known for. I've done CSS work for a decade. So as part of that, I would focus on making things faster. About 2 years ago, I decided that full-time, I want to focus completely on making sites faster for my clients. And it really helps that I've got a slightly addictive personality. So performance, there's always something you can do better, always something you can do faster. So if you're a developer who's got kind of an obsessive or addictive personality, and you really love getting into the tiny details, it really suits me very well, that kind of work.
So imagine that we moved some time in the future.
Oh, okay.
For say for 10, 12, 20 years in the future, and how the performance will change. What will be the new in this?
Wow. So, I mean, going 10, 20 years is probably a bit further than I could even predict, because that's a very long step ahead. Slightly shorter term, we're going to get things, very specific things like HTTP3 and 5G. So we will get platform level features that will make experiences faster by default. But at the same time, we're moving more towards Internet of Things and kind of UI-less UIs, if that makes sense. So the more we move towards the spoken word, IoT, things like that, we may find less of a focus on traditional web performance, potentially. And even just taking the last few years as a bit of a clue, we're moving way more into the client. So JavaScript's getting way more important, or certainly way more prevalent. Devices tend to be getting stronger, particularly in Western and Northern Europe. But when you go towards emerging economies in sort of Africa and the Far East, we're still finding there that people are still coming online with very underpowered devices. So I think over the next 5 to 10 years, we'll be focusing mainly for maybe the West, or certainly developed economies, maybe on IoT, things like that a little more. In emerging markets, it's going to be things more like focusing on getting people online in the first place, and trying to service people with low-powered devices in underpowered networks. That's happening already. Beyond that, we've got platform features. 5G, for example, should be a huge transformative shift. But I've never been good at telling the future, I'm afraid. So it might not happen. We'll see.
Okay, so it's more about more resources and some new technologies.
I think so. I think that's my sort of guess at it would be new technologies is going to be quite a big paradigm shift.
Okay, and so as far as I know, like nowadays, the frameworks does all the things for the developers. So, and what's your opinion about that? Is it good or bad?
Frameworks is a really contentious issue, so we could do like a 2-hour interview if you want all my answers. Frameworks do a lot for the developer experience, which as companies scale and teams grow, standardizing the developer experience, making it enjoyable is important. But of course, without the customer, there is no developer. So everything should service the customer first. I feel like a lot of frameworks were potentially misunderstood or even potentially rushed out of the door. So you'll find that a lot of frameworks, and I'm not going to name any of them, but a lot of them aren't fast by default. So it has to be a diligent developer or a diligent development team that will actually wrangle a framework into being fast again. So I feel like it is quite contentious. There is no reason frameworks can't be fast, but it's only recently that frameworks have started trying to push the fast by default agenda. Normally a lot of it is left to developers and engineering teams to actually make that framework fast in the first place. So I'm a bit on the fence. I'm a bit undecided. I think frameworks are good for the developer experience, of course they are, but they're a quick way to get a slow website.
You work with really huge companies all over the world, and companies like Google, Deloitte, and so on. What are the common performance issues you faced while working?
So yeah, well, first thing is, I'm really fortunate in my work. I get to work with all different types of companies. Usually large companies will feel the effects of my work more than a small company. So for a big e-commerce site, they will have problems where they might be losing money, losing conversions. Common performance issues across companies of all sizes, but mainly big companies, is just not having a performance culture. So in a small company, a small team of people, it can be a lot easier to convince people that performance is important. We should focus on performance. As soon as that company is 10,000 people across 50 offices in 3 continents, gets a lot harder to police and govern that performance process. So a lot of the work I will do with larger companies is more about getting testing strategies in place, having a good performance process, and meeting a lot. This happens more and more, actually. This is getting quite interesting. I meet more and more with C-level executives. So I won't name the company, but a huge company recently, the CFO wanted to have a meeting with me because he wanted to know why performance mattered to his company. And I'm just a developer from England sat with the CFO of this huge multinational explaining to him what JavaScript is. So that's a bit surreal. So for companies like that, it's usually quite high level strategic things. I will work with the engineers to build fast websites, but I think a lot of what I'm brought in to focus on is helping performance culture and helping higher up people or non-technical people high up understand why they need to give attention to web performance.
Okay, so it's better to work, the performance is better in small companies than a big one. The performance culture, I mean.
It's easier to, so kind of, not a paradox, but it's a little unfortunate that, exactly, it's easy to build a performance culture in a small company, but a small company might not notice the importance of performance as much as a big company. So it's kind of this awkward situation where the people who need it the most, it's the hardest to do it for them.
Okay, another question. So, nowadays everything just moving to the market pressure and user experience. So it's more important to create nice looking and fast enough, and not like a good code or like a good performance. What you can tell from your point of view about that?
So are you meaning there's more of a focus on delivery and aesthetics and less focus on performance?
Yes.
I think you're right. Most tech companies are for profit. So the faster they move, the faster they ship, the faster they deliver, the sooner they make money, right? So there is a focus on that for definite. And that means things like performance and accessibility, which I would refer to as like invisible features. They often kind of go to the wayside, kind of get forgotten.
Yeah, they can't just sell it immediately.
Exactly, right? Yeah, you can't sell performance. So what I tend to do is explain to clients that, okay, adding a new feature might get you this many more customers, but you've already lost 10 times as many customers to a faster competitor. Obviously, that would take a long time to gather that data, so that's conjecture at this point. But yeah, in large companies, usually the best way to convince them to take performance seriously is to talk money. Talk about what the potential revenue losses might already be due to slowdowns and performance degradations, or point them to case studies for similar organizations. Walmart increased revenue by up to 1% for every 100 milliseconds of performance improvement, appealing to companies what they actually care about, which is either customer retention or customer engagement or increased turnover. Sort of talking in the kind of more real terms of what performance is about definitely helps. But it's never really going to change. Companies will always have lots of tech debt. They will always have more focus on features than on accessibility or performance. It's just a part of my job to try and slowly change that thought process. But not to sound pessimistic, I just don't ever think that will truly change.
Oh yeah, so in the future it will get worse than now we have.
Hopefully not worse, but if it does, that means there's always work for me to do, right? If it gets worse, I've always got a job. Maybe every 5th client, I'll make their website slower and get them to rehire me. No, I don't think it will get worse. I'm hoping it won't get worse, but I don't think it will get massively better either. I think human nature is very hard to change, so I imagine the status quo will remain. We've got amazing people doing really wonderful work to sort of champion accessibility, performance, but fundamentally businesses are for-profit capitalist enterprises, and it's very hard to change the point of view of a for-profit company until you prove to them that accessibility will make you more cash, performance will make you more cash.
If you won't buy csswizard.com 12 years ago, what will change in your life?
So if I hadn't have basically bought that domain name,
Yeah.
what would my life look like right now? I don't know. Well, at the time, I only bought that domain because I'd finished reading a book called CSS Mastery by my friend Andy Budd. Loved that book, so I was like, well, I want to be CSS Wizardry. And it was cheap. There was a sale on domains, and I could get a domain and a year's hosting for £39. So 2 tiny little incidents, I bought this domain, which has now completely shaped everything I do today. If I hadn't bought that domain, I don't know, I wanted to be an architect, like a physical buildings architect. But then I read that in England it takes 7 years to do that course, and I was like, well, I haven't got 7 years. So I got into the web completely by accident, fell in love with it. So now I might be an architect. My dream job, if I could be anything, would be like a park ranger, like a big national park. You're just driving around the forest, checking on things. I think that would be my ultimate job. But yeah, I think if I hadn't have bought the domain, if I hadn't have got into the web so strongly, my career path was at the time architect, which would still be pretty baller, right? Because architect's a cool job.
Yeah, it starts from A, at least.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Harry, for the interview.
Hey, my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.